The African Transformation Movement is calling for a secret ballot when suspended public protector Mkhwebane's fate is decided in the National Assembly next week. That's after a committee found her guilty of misconduct in connection with various findings from her time in office. The vote is currently set to be done via roll call. For more on this, let's speak to ATM leader Vuyo Zungula. A very good evening to you, Mr. Zungula. Welcome back to News at Prime. So a good place to begin then, because you've written quite a long letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly setting out why you believe that a secret ballot is the best way to proceed with this vote. For the viewers who've not seen that letter, summarize in under a minute why a secret ballot is the best way to do this.
Look, a secret ballot is the best way to engender oversight and accountability, because it enables members of parliament to vote with their true conscience and not be subscribed to the party directives, particularly in this particular case, because the directive that is coming from a party, it is coming from Mr. Mbalula, who, before the inquiry even concluded, pronounced on the guilt of Advocate Mkhwebane. Secondly, this is the same Mr. Mbalula who named Advocate Mkhwebane as a hired gun, and previously recall that Advocate Mkhwebane, as the public protector, found against him in one of the complaints that was submitted to her office. Therefore, what we do not want as a party is now members of parliament, particularly from the ruling party, to be forced to vote out a public protector simply because they fear that Mr. Mbalula, as the Secretary General of the ruling party, is going to discipline them, because Mr. Mbalula is not even looking at the merits of the case, is not even looking at what actually transpired in the inquiry, but it is hatred that is driven by him because of his long-standing hatred of Advocate Mkhwebane. So we want, as ATM, an environment whereby members of parliament will be enabled to vote with their true conscience.
But the Secretary General of the ANC communicates the party message. So it's not a Mbalula decision, right? It would be what he's saying is basically, unless contradicted by the rest of the leadership, an ANC position.
Look, there is no discussion or anything in the public domain that would make one to believe that there was a meeting and one of the resolutions is this. And be that as it may, you'll recall that the Chief Justice, in a case between the UDM and the Speaker of Parliament, stated that members of parliament, whenever there's a conflict between party loyalty and being faithful to the country, they must always vote in accordance to their conscience and be faithful to the country. Now, what you have here now is a case whereby members are threatened, because there's a threat that says if you vote differently to the party mandate, you'll be dealt with. Therefore, the environment is not an environment that is fear of threats. And what we do not want now as the ATM is members who can't exercise their constitutional obligation and their oath of office by voting with their true conscience and want to be forced to vote in accordance to a particular party directive.
The ATM, though, has a party position on the Mkhwebane matter, does it not? From the way in which it was handled, from the inquiry process to now what's going to happen on Tuesday. So when you go into the National Assembly next week, both of you are going to vote the same way, correct?
Next week, as the ATM, we've long deliberated what is the problem with the inquiry, that the inquiry from the very word go, it was an inquiry that Advocate Mkhwebane had to even fight for her legal representation to be part of the inquiry, from the bribery allegations and extortion that have not been thoroughly tested. So we as an organization, we have long deliberated and decided that this is our view. And this is the the
point I'm going to. So if the ATM can deliberate and come to a party position and decide how it's going to vote, because you believe that there were areas during the inquiry process where Advocate Mkhwebane was wronged, treated unfairly, other parties, including the ANC, have the same right to take a party position on how they view the matter and how they intend to vote. No, it's the same principle.
Look, the important part that we need to address here, it is the issue of threats. No one in the organization has been threatened to vote one way or the other. Whereas in the ruling party, what is out there for people to know is that there are threats to say if you do not vote in a particular direction, this is what awaits you. Meaning the members of parliament from the ruling party, including the other parties for that matter, may be wanting to vote with their true conscience because they understand that here the vote is not really about Advocate Mkhwebane and maybe have a perceived lack of understanding of the law. Rather, it is to protect the senior ANC leaders who have been held accountable by an independent public protector. Now, there could be members from all parties who view that this process has been a process that has not been fair. So we want now as an organization to allow or to enable such members to vote with their true conscience and not vote out of fear, because that will not lead to a parliament that we deserve as South Africans, a parliament where members of parliament are able to vote with their true conscience.
Have you spoken to members of the ANC in the National Assembly who agree with your position, who would, if there was a secret ballot, vote against Advocate Mkhwebane? And if so, how many?
Look, we've not had any discussions with the members of the ANC. That is not the way we operate, whereby we try to, to meddle affairs in the ANC internal issues on matters.
But you're speaking on their behalf. But you're speaking on their behalf, saying they're being threatened and will not have the freedom to vote as they wish. How do you make such a statement if they've not told you, for example, that they wish to vote a certain way, but feel as though there'd be a crackdown from their Secretary General? Why not leave them to fight it out within their organization?
Look, when members of parliament take an oath, they take an oath to be loyal and faithful to the Republic of South Africa. And parliament is a parliament of the people of South Africa, not a parliament of a certain political party. Now, if that political party is widely reported in the media that its Secretary General threatened members of parliament from doing what they are constitutionally required to do, it becomes a responsibility of all 400 members of parliament to actually come together and say, we are not going to allow political parties to intimidate and threaten members of parliament from doing what the constitution requires of them. So, if they were threatening each other, but immediately they threatened members of parliament from doing what members of parliament took an oath to actually to do, and their responsibilities in line with the constitution. That is where it becomes problematic. So, as Siteteleli members of the ANC, but what Sitetelela, the institution of parliament, to be free from threats and any forms of victimization from certain leaders, only because members of parliament were doing what is required by the constitution.
So you tried this route before, didn't you, when there was the vote at the end of last year on the Phala Phala panel report? Ultimately, the Speaker did not grant you a request for a secret ballot. Therefore, the ANC used its majority to reject any process that would have followed from its adoption. Basically, if you don't succeed with this request for a secret ballot, what is your next step?
You know, the hypocrisy here, Tembekile, is how in the previous parliament, all people were talking about the importance of voting with their conscience and how members of parliament need to vote, need to vote in line with their individual consciences and not toward the party line. However, now, the question of a secret ballot, it is something that becomes as if whereas a secret ballot has been proven or has been proven by a court judgment that it is the most effective way of engendering or bringing about oversight and accountability over the executive. So what we are going to do as an ATM is to keep on keeping on, making sure that people understand the importance of a secret ballot and why is it important for members of parliament to vote with their conscience and not to be to be dictated or to be threatened as to how they should exercise their constitutional obligations. And we're going to explore all other avenues, including going to court. We've gone to court before. We'll definitely do so again, because we want also to expose how in the previous parliament the courts ruled in favor of a secret ballot, but currently the courts are ruling against the secret ballot, whereas the facts before the law are the same. They were the same then, they are also the same now. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to keep on exposing this system.
Vuyo Zungula, leader of the ATM, good to speak to you as always. Thank you so much for your time.